was first thinking about doing this video, I thought I would just talk about what inspired this particular piece, hoping that would inspire you. But then I thought that that was kind of a cop-out, and if you came looking for inspiration and just saw how I thought of one piece, that was kind of cheating. So I thought about how I can give you some actual practical ways to find inspiration, and I will get to that towards the end. But first, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Brian. I'm a sort of geometric abstract artist living in Vietnam. I like to think of myself as a local international artist, and what I mean by that is I've sold work in cities all around the world, but I still kind of think of myself as a local artist because I really try and build relationships with the people who buy my work, and that's part of the reason why I created this YouTube channel, because I like to sort of share ideas and get feedback and grow as an artist through my interactions with others. So that's why I especially like comments, so please leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell so that you get notifications when I publish new work or new videos. So most of my videos tend to look a little like this. It's me working in the studio, working on a specific piece, and me talking about decisions I make as I create the work. And then I'll also talk about some topic that's related to the work, a little bit more philosophically about just a little bit more like grander ideas rather than specific techniques and decisions I made. So when I think about the vacuum in general, one of the first things that came to mind was an artist named Jeff Koons. If you're not familiar with him, he's a pop artist, and so a lot of his work is very conceptual. He's a little controversial because a lot of people don't appreciate that he tends to hire fabricators. He doesn't make almost all of his work, and he'll often just appropriate things. So with his vacuum piece that I was talking about, he just basically bought some vacuums and put them in a vitrine and said it was art. And so a lot of people kind of have a resentment about that. So that makes me really think about what appropriation is and whether it's such a bad thing. And if you think about how much appropriation happens in the world, if you think about pop music and how much samples happen and how much music is really just either remakes of other songs or sampling from other songs. And think about movies and how many movies are remakes or sequels. If you think about the biggest movie franchise happening in the world right now, which is all the Marvel superhero movies, those are all just taken from comic books, which were written a long time ago. So now I am kind of exploring the composition of the piece, how I might include the vacuum with the permutation shape. And you can see at first I thought about doing the full-size permutation with the vacuum just sort of underneath it, but pretty quickly I thought that wasn't going to work out. And then so I did this sort of side-by-side thing. Kind of breaks a rule of composition. It's like a pretty common design thing where you shouldn't have just two things in your image split down the middle, but I kind of liked it. And then here I'm also trying to decide if I want to include any other text from the vacuum cleaner instruction manual that I had, but I decided against using any text. In the process of making this video, I went from not liking Jeff Koons at all. I mean, literally, I did not like Jeff Koons, to, I guess, maybe sort of liking him. And and it's sort of interesting because a benefit of making these videos for me personally is that I try and do a little bit of research going into videos so that I could share something with you that maybe you haven't known before. But what that often does is it makes me learn something. So I'm just kind of excited when I learn something new, and I get to grow myself as I share with you. But one of the things that happened was I found this quote because I was looking for quotes that he might have said, which is, "The job of the artist is to make a gesture and show people what their potential is. It's not about the object and it's not about the image. It's about the viewer. That's where the art happens." And I really relate to that, and I have said to people multiple times in the past that I don't think that a work of art is finished until someone else sees it, someone besides me. And when people ask me what it means, I say, well, what does it mean to you? And I think that that is the magic moment, the synergy between what I'm doing and what people see, and how they perceive something, and that I think is like the coolest thing. Not many people know, but I used to be in a band, and I really liked working with other people to make music. I thought that the synergy of 3 or 4 people trying to create a work of art together was so much more interesting than just playing a show and playing something that we'd already written. I loved the process of creating music, and I loved the process of working with other people to like take my idea and someone else's and merge it into like a new thing. So getting back to the idea of appropriation though, it really reminded me of there's this group called the Futur, Futur. So I'm going to leave a link below, but Chris Do, who is kind of like the founder of the Futur, which sounds funny, but he's the founder of this group called the Futur, and he talks about how most new ideas are really old ideas that have been remixed, or an old idea with a twist. And it's a really cool video. It's not that long if you want to watch it, but essentially he talks about how just by changing something in an old idea, you can make a new thing happen. And a lot of the biggest like viral memes and things like that are really just like twists on old things. So that to me is in itself a pretty cool way of thinking about inspiration. You don't have to reinvent something or you don't have to invent something from scratch. All you have to do is take something you know and put your own personal spin on it. And I think that's a really valuable lesson when thinking about inspiration, because you have it in you and you have it out there, and all you have to do is look at something and say, how can I look at that differently? It's like when I created this piece, you know, I actively went around my apartment because I was running low on collage materials, and I'm like, what can I use to make a new piece? And this piece of paper is taken from the instruction manual from my super cheap Chinese vacuum that I bought here in Vietnam. And it just shows that you can find inspiration anywhere. But specifically, I'm taking this very mundane image of an illustration of a vacuum, and I'm combining it with my permutation, which is very much me, and even the composition of my permutation with the pieces falling down is something I've done many times before, but the fact that I'm having a vacuum up the pieces is like the new thing. And it's already been on Instagram since I made this piece, and people really enjoy it, so I know that it's working and it's kind of fun. So I said in the beginning that I would be talking about inspiration ideas, and one of the things I like to do is, while I'm making pieces, what I'll do whenever I'm coming to a point where I'm making a decision, like, should I do this thing? What I'll do is I'll stop and I'll take a photo of the work in progress, and I will then create a note over the top of it, using your markup feature on your phone, in your camera. And I'll just write a note saying what I was thinking about that decision, like, what if I did this? And I'll save that image so that I could look at it later and decide if I want to try that later. Because a lot of times you have moments of inspiration, but you're in the midst of something and you don't have time to really explore it or whatever. So it's good to keep records of it, and I find that this is a really quick way to do it because it doesn't take me out of my work, just a few seconds, and I can get my idea across to myself. So when I look at it again, scrolling through my camera roll, I will be able to visit it again. So another thing I like to do for inspiration is I follow certain hashtags that are related to the work I do on Instagram. And if I see something that I find striking in whatever way, I'll take a screenshot of it. And I'll look at it again later, and whether it's like a color palette or a composition or a theme or a subject matter, I will think about how I could do that in my own style or in my own way. And I find that to be really helpful for inspiring me to create a new work. And not everything works out that way. But one thing I will say is, if you ever do this technique, it's always a good idea to thank the source. So like when you're taking a screenshot of that image, you're also taking a screenshot of that user. And so like if you do something and you're really proud of the work and you can see the relationship to the original, you could go ahead and do a shout out to that artist and say, I was really inspired by this work, and so I created this, and tag them and see if they respond to you, because that is a good way of like reaching a new audience, reaching some artists that you admire, obviously, because you like the work. And it just keeps you honest, because it acknowledges that you use someone else's work as inspiration, which I think is not shameful, and it's not a bad thing unless you're obviously just copying, which is probably something that is okay to do as long as you keep it to yourself as like a way of practicing, a way of like learning a technique or teaching yourself how to do a process. So yeah, if you copy someone, please don't just copy it and then post it up and say you thought of it yourself, because that's not what we're talking about here. That's not inspiration, that's plagiarism. So another thing that Chris Do says in that video is it's also really inspiring to look to other forms of media to inspire your work. So if you're like a musician, you could look at film. That's another good way, although that's a pretty sort of abstract way. It's not as concrete as some of my other ideas, but it is a good way to sort of like break away from the trap of like, I'm a visual artist and I only look at visual art and that's where I get all my inspiration. It's really thinking about things in a different way, which is going to help you break your own habits, which is always important when you're an artist. You want to like create new ways of looking at the world, and I think that's the biggest takeaway. If you take anything from today's video, I want you to go out and be creative and think about these two things. Don't feel pressure to make something new. It's okay to not have a completely original idea. In fact, if it's so new, people will tend to reject it because it's unfamiliar. And I'm not saying that you should never try to be new, but don't feel pressure to always make something new. It's mostly about having a new way of looking at something that we all know already. And the second thing is that inspiration doesn't just happen. It doesn't come from nowhere or from like divinity. It comes from practice. It comes from constantly looking at the world and thinking about new ways to interpret things that you already understand, and being open to surprise and being open to new ideas. Getting back to that Kuhn's quote, he says, show people what their potential is through your example. And I think that right now, the way the world is, it's so polarized, and one of the most important roles we have as artists is like showing people that there's more than one way to look at the world, because right now so many people are so caught up in like, I have this worldview and no one else, everyone that has a different worldview is bad. And maybe if we all took a little time to think about the world in different ways, the world will be a little calmer and people will be able to understand other people's perspectives and hopefully just grow closer to each other. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.